This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for isms. Now, there's been some question about the name of this podcast. So let me just tell you where it came from, because I've had some people say, that's a little strange. But I was sitting here one day, uh, just about 6, 7 months ago, thinking about how can I get through the challenges of today. And, when I was growing up, I was always taught to believe if you're a good person, you do hard work, guess what? You're just going to rise to the top and everything's going to be fine. And there is some truth to that, but it's not just about that. There are other things that hit us and shatter us. And sometimes we just don't know how to move forward. And that's how I was feeling. And I thought of words like humanism, professionalism, altruism. And I thought, what a great name for a podcast. But let's stick with the positive isms because there's plenty of negative ones out there. My guest today is going to take us on a little bit of a journey of who he is, where he came from. And, you know, even though you talk to businesses on a regular basis, I think what we're going to find out today is that even what you talk to a business about today can resonate in each of us individually. So, David Gilbert, welcome to newclevelandradio.net and to ISMS, and a big shout out to podmatch.com, because if it weren't for that organization, I probably wouldn't have met David and wouldn't feel so inclined to want to learn more. So, take it away.
Well, thank you for having me, Karen. We all have our isms, and I've definitely had my fair share. And I'd say working with business, I kind of make the distinction. It tends to be business people, but it's really people committed to growth. And if you're committed to your own growth, it's only a matter of time before you're going to feel stuck, right? So we all go through life where we have these opportunities, but this is what I call the alchemical journey, kind of that inner process of transformation. And to jump into my own, like for my own self-discovery, I really realized that my journey really started around the age of 3 or 4 was one of the big milestones, and then another one when I was 11. And that was around the age 3 or 4. My parents got a divorce, no fault of their own, just how life turned out for me. But there was a memory that came up where they were yelling at each other, arguing. I probably made it out yelling because I was 3, so it felt like. And I ran off kicking and screaming because I yelled at them to stop it, and it didn't do anything. Now, why that moment is so big for my life, because that instilled this feeling, which became a belief, right? I'm powerless and I'm voiceless. And then fast forward to age 11 and the Gilbert side, that's my dad's side of the family. We're all crop dusters. My dad was a pilot. He was fighting fires in Idaho, and he suddenly passed one day when I was 11. And this sent me on a subconscious quest, partly conscious, but underneath, I was wondering what makes life worth living. Like I went really inward after that. And then what I've learned now, I was also asking, why is life so painful? Like, why would we have these circumstances where it feels like everything can be pulled out under the rug? And if you've lost someone suddenly, or if you've lost like a job suddenly, like we all experience loss, right? So it's been my own journey of understanding those first deeper pattern, kind of the core beliefs that made me who I am today. But if you're committed to growth, you get to go beyond that. And then also, losing my dad, um, going on that inward journey, you can call it healing. I call it self-discovery because I think we're all whole as we are. But you can absolutely get stuck in these old patterns where if you're living in a subconscious limiting belief, which is just a belief that you're not aware of, like for example, for myself of I'm powerless, Well, you're going to live out that belief because your beliefs determine behaviors and your behaviors determine your life. So you're going to go through life, and until you start to uncover the beliefs that make up who you are, you're going to continuously run into this circumstance in some different flavor. And it could show up in one area, and then you like work on that, and then it shows up in another area, and then you're somewhere else, and you're like, what is going on? I feel like my whole life, I'm coming up against this force of feeling stuck, and what is this? So as you go through this process of discovering those, and then I like to have fun, and it's like, how do we turn those into gold? How do we make that some of the greatest gold there is, what I call soul gold? And by going through that process, um, you can start to see those patterns and work through those patterns. But it's a journey.
It's interesting because some of the terminology that you were using um, when you were 3 years old, you wouldn't have known that you were really powerless. You just probably felt sad that, hey, they're yelling at each other, but I've been told not to yell. But if they're yelling, I can yell, and yet you're not being heard. Um, so as a 3 or 4 year old, we're probably feeling a little sad about that and confused. Um, when you're 11 years old and you lose your dad, not only are you sad, but in your case, you basically had lost him twice. Okay.
Mhm.
You lost him at a young age when they got divorced. Now you're losing him again to maybe unknown circumstances, but you're confused. And confusion takes our brain in many different directions. And I didn't even start to understand this until I was in my mid 50s. Things from my past just kept coming into my head. And I kept blaming it. Oh, it's because my brother did that to me. Oh, it's because my mother yelled at me. Oh, it's because I wasn't invited to prom, whatever it was. Okay. And it just like, and I kept inflating these things, but I kept bringing it into my current life and saying, it's because of these things I'm unhappy. I'm depressed. I'm not doing what I want to do. And it was my youngest son who we were driving home. He was taking me home from work one day and he said, Mom, you're depressed.
Mhm.
And I said, No, I'm not. He said, Well, yes, you are. I said, Come on. You know, you take medication for depression. So now you want to put that on me. And he goes, No, but you're depressed. And as soon as you admit that you are, you can start to get better. And I fought him for months on it. I was not depressed. But then I was sitting at my desk at work and I realized what I was saying to one of my students was not what was in my head. I heard words coming out of my mouth and my head kept saying something else. And I noticed that the student was very confused. And I said, You don't understand what I'm saying. And they go, You don't know what you're saying. And it was like, Oh my God, my son is right. I don't. So we have these things from our past, they never go away. We can bury them. So, how do you help individuals who come to you because they are really burdened with past that they don't realize is making them who they are today?
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that story. And it's funny, the ones closest to us like see our blind spots, but then that you could use the word trigger, not always my favorite word, just makes us like, no, that's not the case. Uh and part of it is to bring some humor, but it takes acceptance to get there first, right? Isn't it kind of silly we can have an experience from decades ago? One experience, one person yelled at you or called you a silly name and you carry that with you for your whole life potentially. Like, wow, we love to beat ourselves up.
We do. Yeah. But we don't like when somebody else is beating us up,
Yeah.
you know, but it's okay that we do it to ourselves.
Yes.
The reality of it is it's not okay.
Not okay. Like if we had a bully every day that was saying mean things to us and following us everywhere, we'd eventually be like, "Shut up, bully," or like, "We're gonna put you in a closet." And like,
Yeah,
but we tolerate it in our own brains, and part of that is we're unaware. So to answer your question, the first part is awareness, like learning. It can be scary. Something like the subconscious, I visualize it, I'm a visual person, as like blackness, right? You're like jumping into the unknown.
yeah,
So for a lot of people, that's scary because, like you said, what if you bring up a memory where somebody made you feel really bad or less than or not lovable or whatever the thing is, which we all got them because we're all humans and we're all saying things to each other all the time. Um, but by jumping in, you get to shine light on these unconscious parts of yourself. And that's the first phase of the journey, which often can be the scariest. Anytime we get stuck, right? Like not wanting to acknowledge we're depressed or whatever the thing is, and then having to take that leap and you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But as you bring that to the surface, you can practice acceptance for it. We can also acknowledge we're just being human. Like even our loved ones will say things not nice. And we do it all the time. We So it's kind of comical, just like if you really collected all the things, all the experiences that have been in quotations holding you back, but it's also real because it is, you start to see that we put ourselves in these subconscious constraints. And to get scientific for a second, like what is it really? Well, thoughts, right? And then with thoughts, we create words. And our words are putting us in this prison, if we let it be a prison. And then you could even say it's just vibration. Like we're using vibration to put us in this vibrational pattern that keeps us feeling stuck. And it's unconscious, so no wonder you're gonna feel really stuck. It's part of the journey. So I love that you brought up depression because I learned my tattoo sleeve tells the story of alchemy, and I jumped into learning more about alchemists, and they saw depression as that was like the fertilizer for growth. Like that meant it was time to make a change in your life.
right.
And not from like a, I don't know if you have that context of like guilt or shame or whatever, but like no, like a gentle push, or there's something to discover about yourself, right? There's some deeper pattern or thought pattern or emotional repression that's been tucked down. I know that's what I did with losing my father. Like you said, I was confused and I just pushed away those emotions thinking I dealt with them. I did not. It wasn't until I did a breath work journey, extended breath work, that it like felt like it cracked open and I was able to release and feel and honor all those emotions. So that's kind of the first two phases, right? Bringing it to awareness, understanding if it's a really emotional charged experience that you didn't have the tools to integrate, especially if you were young or whatever it was, like allowing space to clear that out and honor them, right? We sometimes think, oh, if we just push them away, it's fine. No, like there's more science showing it gets stuck in your tissue and like it's part of your being. So by expressing them or feeling them fully, like you're honoring them. And this is where I love to zoom out in life too, that your greatest challenges can be your greatest gold. And if you lose a loved one, that can transform you to where you can have a meal with loved ones and it can be the greatest thing ever. And you can just have a new level of appreciation. So whatever challenges you went through, if you're starting to like rack your brain, like, yeah, there was one time that my mom said, or somebody told me this and it really landed. And it's like, maybe that's true. If I were to ask you, is it absolutely true? If we got to the root of it, it'd probably be no. But also that hard experience, you grew in some capacity. And back to being human, we can acknowledge that was a behavior adaptation to help you survive to get where you are today, but it no longer serves you to carry it forward. And it's your opportunity now to let that go, to step in a new version of yourself, but that's also scary too, because it's almost like a rebirth.
You know, we're going through challenging times right now, and I'm sure we've gone through challenging times other years, other centuries as well. But we now are going through a very challenging time, and a lot of us are finding that the people who we believed in, who we were close to, maybe don't believe the same way we do. And so either we get stuck in only seeing them the way they used to be, or we get this weird revelation, oh my God, how was I ever friends with them? Because we're not on the same page. And one of the things that I've been really seeing recently is that we have to stop worrying about, do I have something in common with this person? What is it, that's drawing me there? I think we have something in common with each other, whether we want to believe it or not. We don't have to be agreeing on 100% of everything. And I realized this. I was thinking about my relationship with my mother. Now, my mother and I always said we had a wonderful relationship. But in the back of my mind, I always said we have a love-hate relationship. And I said it to everybody. I even said it to her. And she would laugh at me and she'd go, as your mother, I have a right to criticize you. I have a right to yell at you. And it'd be, Mom, I'm an adult. No, you don't. And she would say, yes, I do. And so I talked about having a love-hate relationship. But after my mother died, I realized we had the most beautiful, loving relationship because I allowed myself to go back and look at it. And the things I didn't like about either what she said or how she said it had nothing to do with her. It's all about me and some other things that had happened in my life. But because she was a constant, it was easy to put that on her. And so I went through a grief recovery program only to get to shed myself of some of that negative feeling I had in the past. And I started doing that this past year, saying, I don't want to feel negative towards my neighbor. I may not agree with what they say. Maybe I'm not hearing it properly. But I've got to dig deep inside myself and figure out where that's coming from and what good I can find. And it sounds like that's what you do. You try to spit out the good, stop talking about the bad. So, how do you help a client that comes to you and everything is, Dave, it's his fault. David, it's her fault. Oh, I'm a perfect person. It's never my fault.
Yeah. I love and want to acknowledge like how powerful what you're sharing, because this is part of being human again. And the simple way of saying that is I put up a mirror and I can ask the questions, a little bit of a taste like, is it true? And you'd be like, yeah, she definitely showed up like that. She absolutely did. And then you ask again, is it absolutely true? And if you really get to the core of that, it would be like you discovered, no, right? That was me projecting what I thought onto her, but in reality, we just loved each other and it was just love. And I had my own stories going on, and that played out, and that's how I saw her. So that's how I interpreted it. And then that created these feelings, and then I love that feeling cycle. So I stayed in that verse. No, I just loved my mom, and we were just, as we talked about before, close ones see your blind spots.
Yeah.
And we'll poke at them. And then with that, you know, can you think of one stress-free reason to keep the thought, right? If you're saying my partner shows up like this and they never do this thing for me, and usually it's no, like no, it's only that thought, and then you start to realize you have this insight moment of wow, it was only my thoughts creating that circumstance, which I believed was true. So by doing that on yourself, you are able to expand your compassion first for yourself because you realize, oh my gosh, I'm so silly. I just got this monkey brain that just keeps looping, saying these crazy stories. I never checked them because I thought they were true this whole time. And as you can have compassion for yourself, then like you said, your neighbors or other people, like we can have more compassion, which we're in this environment now where we think it's bad to have different beliefs or whatever the thing is. But once again, at the end of the day, we all want the same stuff. We all want the right to happiness. We all want our kids to be happy and healthy. We all want like a good environment. So it's so unfortunate as times are getting feel like they're getting harder right now. There's so much opportunity for us to unite, but it starts with building that compassion within yourself because then you really start to see how silly you are, but also how powerful you are simultaneously, right? Because I'm sure once you started working on that and like had that shift about your mother, like you probably got new power or new feeling of being alive or something, I'm
Well,
guessing.
and it helped me relate to my two boys differently, you know, because I kept saying as they were growing up, I love your grandmother, but I don't want to be like her. And they would look at me and go, like, why? What's wrong with her? And be like, well, don't you hear the way she talks to me? And they, of course, they didn't hear what I was hearing because my brain was doing that to me. Um, and of course, I didn't know that my brain could do that to me. I just thought what I heard was real. But when I realized that, I actually had a sit down with my boys and I told them, you know, this is how I want to come across to you. If I'm not, okay, can we have another dialogue about that? I may not be able to change. I'm not, promising, but I know how I want to be. And if I can get there on my own, that's great. But I might not be able to. I may look at you in reverse position and see me there and my mother and me, and I may start sounding the way I thought she did. And my oldest son has never had to say anything to me. My youngest son, because I see him more often, he'll say to me, you're doing it again. That's all he has to say. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, I just heard those words in my head. You're right. I am. Um, I think this hard part for all of us is we think we know who we are,
Mm.
and we don't like when that little voice inside of our head says, you really shouldn't be this way. And we fight it. And it took years of therapy to realize therapy was not for me because therapy was just making me regurgitate everything. But when I started working with coaches and creating my plan of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to face, the light went off. It was like, you said, I have control. This is my life. Okay. Yeah. Your parents may have argued and gotten divorced when you were 3 years old. That's part of your life, but it doesn't mean you have to keep reverting to being the 3 year old. Your father died when you were 11. It's really easy to go back to those feelings. And you can go back and re-witness them, but then don't you take those feelings and say, okay, this is how I can move forward again.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to touch on two tools you brought up that are so powerful in relationship. First is asking for feedback. That's what you're essentially saying, right? Like I know I have this blind spot. I'm committed to not showing up like this. Can you give me feedback when I don't show up like that? Because oftentimes we think we're showing up one way, but we are totally not.
Yeah.
And then also expectations versus agreements or even commitments, right? We project what we think, how we think things should be, and we never even have a discussion with somebody else, like if it's a partner, let's say, or family member, and we just project this expectation instead of verbalizing an agreement from one powerful being to another powerful being using communication and agreeing on something or next level of commitment. And that can just free up so much energy and like just love too. Um, and then also to your point as well, like, yeah, that's where those hard circumstances, typically they're the ones when you're young, because those start to form who you are and how you see the world until you start to awaken to those deeper patterns. Um, those can be your greatest gold because when you overcome those, when you see those patterns, when you reflect on them, when you accept them and start to transmute them, like for me, feeling powerless and voiceless, like I ended up, going to start a business because I thought I wanted to be a big business owner, and I had a meditation supply store and I had a vision for a franchise and I was selling subscription boxes and all the things. Well, I signed the lease January 2020. So best time for a brick and mortar store. But that led me to the work I do today, which is one-to-one transformation. And I found that's my sweet spot. And I get to give people the most powerful tools I discover because I've been searching that for myself, right? And then share it with others and then help them use those tools. And that brings me so much fulfillment. As well as getting like on a podcast today. If you saw me 5+ years ago, I'd be sweating, be very stoic. I would not know what to say next. So like by pushing through those obstacles and rediscovering the freedom on the other side, like that's your greatest opportunity. And I really want to solidify this by acknowledging those parts of your story that you will naturally unconsciously push away because it's a survival mechanism. So no guilt or shame or whatever judgment if you are in that place like, wow, I've had this pattern I've never dealt with, no matter what age you are, because this is how we're wired. This is our natural state. And that hard experience that you keep replaying, like you are the only one that will have your unique story for the infinity of eternity. So honor your story.
I love that.
Honor it.
You know, when I decided to start podcasting, it was before I even understood really what a podcast was. I had heard about it, but um, wasn't sure how to go about it. My husband sat me down one day and said, what do you think you need to do this? We bought a lot of sophisticated, expensive equipment, which was totally ridiculous, but I did. Um, and this was about 11 years ago now. And my husband said, why do you want to do this? And I said, well, I was brought up being told you don't hang your dirty laundry out for your neighbors to see. I said, but I don't think my past is really dirty laundry. I think my past has experiences that other people have gone through. And if I don't get my voice out there, I'm not going to hear it back from others. And maybe I can learn that, oh, so you went through this too? Oh, I wasn't the only one who thought I was the wallflower at the school dance. Oh, um, I wasn't the only one who was wearing a bright red dress when everybody else was wearing pink. Um, because I always thought it was about me being different, being odd, or people assuming that. And my husband looked at me and he goes, I've never seen that in you. And I said, well, but that's who I am. And I fight it every day. But once I started talking about it, the freedom was there. It was like, yeah, I remember that red dress. Yeah, I remember how silly I felt. Okay. But prior to doing this, when I would think about that red dress, I felt terrible. I didn't want to look at anything red. And that was my mother's favorite color. And every time I'd go out and buy something, she'd say, it's pretty pink. did you try the red? And the flames would go off my head. But I don't think she knew how that red dress had affected me. So what I encourage people is tell your story, just like David said. Even if it's just journaling your story and nobody else hears it, you're hearing it. You're hearing that you're okay. Because we all have doubts about ourselves. I don't think there's anyone in this world. And you can't convince me that there's anybody out there who is so positive that they've never felt anything bad, done anything bad, or something bad might not happen to them in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, so powerful. So powerful. And you know, this visual came up of there's like a part of you that's in a basement and it's dark. And by sharing your story, you can bring those parts to life. And then you've been through therapy, and it sounds like working with coaches and stuff, and internal family systems is often a big part of that. Part of what I shared too. So like we have these different parts with different voices, with different stories, and they hold on to the things. But the more you could shine light by sharing your story, expressing it, there's just like you said, writing it down or sharing it through word, right? Sharing it, the more you can see that, and then the more you'll see that in other people too. You'd be like, oh yeah, even my wife and I now, we just had something yesterday where something came up, and it was a video talking about our core wounds, and we had a not quite an argument, but almost an argument the day before that. My wife was like, "Yeah, I just like totally had a fit because it like hit my deep core wound," and we were both like, we just like openly talked about it and then laughed about it and moved on. Versus, you know, we can have that same experience and just like be in it for a month or a week and not talk to your loved one for a week because you didn't realize there was just some core wound from a childhood that is still like a puppet. It's still kind of pulling strings. And another metaphor too, because I'm really visual, it's like a piece of glass of your life force or you like got left in the past. So by rediscovering these parts, you get to bring them in back to you, and it opens you up to truly being present to the moment. Like truly being present. What do you want? What do what is this phase of life teaching you? What can you do to connect with somebody else? How can you have more compassion when the world needs it more than ever? And how can you see the good? Because just to throw a monkey wrench in today's conversation, I mean, it's also the greatest time to be alive. And I just like to share, like, we did it, humanity. Like, we have the power now to type into a keyboard, and a robot can go create that in the physical world. So, my perspective is that it's only us catching up by going on that inward journey, like bringing our unconscious up, because now we have to see that we've mastered the external world, so now it's time to master the internal world, and this is all how we collectively rise up.
I love that. I truly do because, you know, I still get that vision in my head every once in a while when I'm sharing something of me being out in the backyard, hanging up the laundry, wondering if somebody's going to come over and say, that shirt is really dirty. You got to take it back in and wash it. Um, and it's okay because when I look at it, I stop and I ask myself, is it really? Is it really too much? And is it really real? Are those really my thoughts? Um, I took a intentionality um, group session, and it was over, I think, a period of 6 weeks. And the group decided to stay together after the 6 weeks. We had really bonded. But what was helpful about this group, and most of us are still hanging out together, um, we can help each other. We can tell. In fact, last week I called one of the women in the group and started sharing something with her. And she very quietly said, is that how you see it? And I was quiet for a while. I had to think about it. And I said, no. She said, so Where is this coming from? And I thought to myself, and I said, well, I thought you would understand it more if I presented it this way. And she said, no, I want you to be real, be intentional. What are you feeling? What are those thoughts? And then I was honest. I didn't realize I was not being honest, but I was trying to make it so that I thought she would listen better. And the reality was that she knows me well enough now. So it's okay to let people ask you if that's what you're feeling. It's okay to take a step back and think about it, because too many of us try to do things for other people, and that is spare their feelings as we share ours. And sometimes it's like we've just got to let it out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And uh in the coaching space, like when I'm working with somebody, it's I call that disrupting your thinking. And constantly doing that. It's like once you awaken to the patterns and you start to see it and you can acknowledge it and accept it, then like they're gonna show up later, but then we just get to mess with the thinking, right? Come back, is that true? Often no. Uh, and where does that come from? And how do you want to relate moving forward, right?
Like,
who do you want to be moving forward? And the more you can just see that for what it is, the more you can work with it. And what, once again, like the power is, it's not going to disappear like you've been sharing the whole time, right? But what took you a decade to maybe a year to 6 months of getting stuck in and you didn't know why, now takes you 5 minutes or one good friend to be like, hey,
yep,
hey, silly. And you're like, all right, I'm back.
yep,
And we're
exactly.
back to it. And now we're back. Still human. And I always like to acknowledge like part of our brain is wired to focus on survival. Like that's its default mode, right? We're a mammal, we're a biological being. Another part is to be right about being right. You could call that the ego or personality. So it's going to hold on to the evidence of the past to create your future. And if you could really understand that, you can be like, whoa, what if I could create my future from focusing on my future instead of my past? And this is how life starts to get exciting.
Well, I have a little sticky note on my computer, and I look at it whenever I'm conversing with you or when I'm just sitting at my desk. And it says, how is that working for you? So
Mhm.
as soon as I get this thought in my head and I want to just run with it, it's like, how's that working for you? Is that the right way to do it? And it only takes a couple of seconds to ask yourself that question, but it has saved me many times. And there are other days that my very lazy lizard brain just jumps in and does it the way I'm thinking until I realize I've got to back out. I've got to take a step back. My belief is that if we can be intentional about what we do and believe in those intentions, that we're really not going to do anything that is going to harm us, because you're going to be thinking about it. You're going to know what it is that you're going to do. You're going to have the tools. And I'm sure in your training, you help people develop their toolkit. They know what they need. Like I said, this little post-it note, it came from working with another one of my podcasters that I produce. And every once in a while in the podcast, she'll say to me, so how's that working for you? And it resonated. It was like, she's right. I have to ask myself that question, because for most of my life, I've been a doer and a giver. And then when my son noticed that I was depressed, I realized that my energy was going forward into everybody else. but I had nothing inside of me. And once I recognized the depression, it was like, okay, I'm not any good to anybody else because I'm not being good to me. So, how can my listeners find you, maybe get into coaching with you or learn more about some of the tools that you have to offer?
Yeah. So you can go to David G. Gilbert, GILBERT.com. That's my personal website, or goldenlife.com. And that's kind of focused around the book I just launched, The Alchemical Journey, The Ultimate Quest for Inner Gold, which really showcases the inner journey in a story form where there's the hero and he meets the guide and he has to uncover his beliefs and discover his inner parts and meet his higher self and overcome the dragon of fear and then uh, get in touch with the inner masculine or feminine, which is like intuition and clarity and courage, as well as grounding and grounding with Mother Earth, and then coming back to declare who you are moving forward. Right? Straight to your point of that's really what you're saying. This is who I'm committed to being moving forward. And when you get caught up in the story, I like to use a similar tool. I just say, maybe, do you want that to be true? Right? We're getting to the same spot. And what do you want it to be moving forward? And how are you going to live in commitment to that? So, yeah, check me out online or check out the book if you want a fun story that shows that map. And I hope this brought a lot of value today, a lot of gold.
Well, I will tell you, it has totally helped me today. Um, I am going through some changes again. Um, I believe it's okay to pivot. Didn't used to believe that. I just kept walking on that same path, and every tree looked the same, every flower looked the same. Um, but every once in a while, you get to a point and you go, okay, I'm going to pivot. Don't have to pivot far, but I just got to make a little bit of change because I'm not growing. I'm not really, and you know what? I don't think we ever really reach the pinnacle, and that's okay because that pinnacle gets higher and higher as we walk. So, for those of you out there who are saying, well, then what good is coaching? Coaching is going to teach you to like yourself. And if it doesn't, then you're not committed to coaching. So, uh, it took me more than half of my life to get into all this. I am so grateful. Again, David, you've been an excellent guest. We're going to have you on again. I'm going to get the book. I'm going to read the book. I'm going to take the journey and see how much we have in common. So that'll
I
be
love it.
interesting.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation too. And it's a summitless peak. Right. And the other part we didn't even get to yet is what's that thrilling vision to pull you forward into versus being created from your past. There's the other opportunity, and we all get those moments where we hit one peak, and it's like, what's the next thrilling vision? And how do we expand into that? So can't wait to connect again. And yeah, today was truly a blast.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye now.